They say people remember the way you make them feel, and that afternoon in the office parking lot, they made me feel like I was dirt under their shoes. It was pouring rain. My old Honda Civic, paint peeling like sunburned skin, wheezed into the lot like it might give up any second. I was late, again, because the ignition took 3 tries to start in wet weather. As I stepped out clutching my worn-out tote bag, I heard them. 3 of my coworkers, Lauren, Brandon, and the ever-perfect Michelle, were huddled under an umbrella. Their eyes flicked to my car, then to me, and the laughter started. "God, that thing belongs in a junkyard," Brandon said loudly enough for me to hear over the rain. Michelle smirked. "I didn't even know they still ran without pedals." Lauren's voice was the worst. She leaned in, stage whispering like it was a big secret. She probably has to pray to it every morning. I wanted to vanish. My cheeks burned, my throat ached, but I forced myself to keep walking, mud splashing on my shoes as if the universe wanted to join in the joke. I thought I'd gotten away without showing them how much it hurt. But then Michelle called out, "Hey, if you need a ride home, I've got a spare seat, in a car that actually works." Their laughter followed me inside. It stuck to me like wet clothes, heavy, suffocating, impossible to ignore. That night, lying in bed in my tiny apartment, the sound replayed over and over. I had dreams bigger than this life, but they felt impossibly far away. Still, one thought kept circling in my mind like a storm. One day, they'll see. Not just that I made it, not just that I had a better car, but that every cruel word, every smirk, every drop of rain soaking me that day would fuel something they'd never forget. Fast forward a few years, and I can tell you, I kept my promise. The day I rolled up in a gleaming midnight blue Tesla and parked right next to them, their faces were worth every sleepless night I spent building my future. And I'm going to tell you exactly how I did it. You'll hear every moment they underestimated me, every step I took to make sure I'd come out on top. And most importantly, you'll see why this revenge wasn't just about a car, it was about taking back my dignity. Because here's the truth. Sometimes the best way to silence laughter is with the roar of an engine they could never afford. So stick around until the end of this story. I promise, the look on Michelle's face will live in your head forever. And maybe, just maybe, you'll walk away with the fire you need to make your own version of this revenge happen. Now, let's rewind. Back to the girl with the beat-up Civic, rain in her hair, and a storm in her chest. The story starts there. My name's Emily Carter, and if you had met me back then, you probably wouldn't have remembered me. I wasn't the type to stand out in a crowd. My clothes were always clean but never new. My hair usually pulled back into a plain ponytail because salon trips weren't in my budget. And my car, well, you've already met the infamous Civic. I bought it used when I was 19 with money I'd saved from working double shifts at a diner. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And at the time, that meant something. By the time I was 27, the poor thing had survived more winters than I had relationships. Rust had crept up around the wheel wells, the driver's side mirror was duct taped in place, and the AC had given up during a July heat wave 2 years prior. I wasn't broke exactly, but I wasn't living well either. My job as an administrative assistant paid just enough to cover rent in a dingy apartment and keep my student loan collectors from calling too often. Anytime I thought about upgrading my car, there was always something more urgent, groceries, and bills, emergency vet visits for my cat, Jasper. Most days I could ignore the little digs from coworkers. But the thing about humiliation is, when it happens in public, it sticks deeper. It doesn't just bruise your pride, it brands you. That rainy day in the parking lot wasn't the first time they'd mocked me, but it was the loudest. Here's the thing people don't understand. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't stupid. I was tired. I'd been working hard my entire life, but when you're climbing uphill with a backpack full of debt, it feels like the summit keeps moving further away. Still, I had dreams I didn't talk about out loud. I wanted to start my own business, something in digital marketing, where I could combine my knack for design with my obsession for figuring out what made people click on things. I'd been taking online courses at night, scribbling ideas into a worn leather notebook I kept under my bed. The problem was time. Time to study, time to plan, time to execute. After 9 hours of work, plus a bus ride home when the Civic decided it was having a rest day, I barely had the energy to make dinner. And yet, that night after they laughed at me in the rain, I didn't open Netflix. I didn't scroll through my phone until I fell asleep. I pulled out that notebook, I made a list of everything I needed to learn, everything I needed to save, and every single person who had ever made me feel small. I wrote Tesla at the top of the page, not because I loved cars, but because I wanted a symbol, something sleek, quiet, and undeniable, something that would make them remember every word they'd said. I didn't know it then, but that list was the start of the climb, and the climb would change everything. The first few months after I made that list were exhausting. By day, I was still Emily, the girl with the rusty Civic and the safe job. By night, I was someone else entirely, someone who devoured marketing courses, studied ad camp, planes, and designed mock-up websites until my eyes burned. At first, I kept it quiet. My little side project wasn't exactly glamorous. I was helping small businesses with their social media, designing flyers for local cafes, and managing email newsletters for a dog grooming salon. It barely paid enough to cover my internet bill, but it was mine. And every dollar I earned from it went into a separate savings account, untouchable, no matter how tempting it was to use it for groceries or rent. That money wasn't for survival. It was for freedom. The problem was, keeping it quiet didn't stop the comments. If anything, the Civic had become their favorite running joke. One Monday morning, I pulled into the lot just as Lauren parked her shiny white BMW. She stepped out, sunglasses perched perfectly on her head, and glanced at my car like it had personally offended her. "You know, Emily," she said sweetly, "there are these things called car loans. You might want to look into one." Brandon, walking by with his coffee, chimed in. "Yeah, before that thing collapses in on itself." I smiled tightly like I didn't care. But inside, every word was gasoline on a fire I'd been tending carefully. The truth was, my Civic wasn't the only thing breaking down. My patience was wearing thin. One afternoon, I stayed late at the office to finish a project. Michelle was there too, sitting a few desks over. She glanced at my open laptop, where I was tweaking a client's website, and smirked. "Wow, Emily, you moonlight as a tech genius? Let me guess, you're building your dream car out of HTML? I didn't answer. Instead, I closed my laptop, packed up my things, and walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. On the bus ride home that night, the Civic was in the shop again. I thought about quitting my job entirely. But quitting would mean losing the stability that was funding my escape plan. Oh, I made a new rule for myself. Every insult, every joke, every sideways glance would be turned into fuel. I started waking up earlier, working on my side business before my 9-to-5. I networked online, reached out to bigger clients, and slowly raised my rates. The jobs got better, the checks got bigger, and with each payment, my savings account crept closer to my goal. But just as I was hitting my stride, something happened that made the insults go from annoying to personal. One Friday, I walked into the break room to find Michelle holding a set of keys, my car keys. "I found these in the parking lot," she said innocently, dangling them in the air. "Don't worry, I made sure your Civic was still there. Not like anyone would steal it." The room erupted in laughter. My hands clenched around my coffee cup. I took the keys, thanked her through gritted teeth, and left before anyone saw the tears. That night, I didn't cry for long. Because I realized something. I was closer than they thought. And when I made it, they'd never forget it. The day it happened didn't feel like a turning point at first. I was at my favorite coffee shop, laptop open, working on a new campaign for a boutique clothing brand. The owner had found me through a referral, and after a 30-minute Zoom call, she'd signed a contract worth more than my monthly office paycheck. When I hit send on my first invoice and saw the payment confirmation land in my account, something shifted. My savings goal wasn't a dream anymore. It was a number I could almost reach out and touch. Still, I didn't realize how close I really was until 2 weeks later. I got an email with the subject line, "Proposal accepted. Let's begin immediately." It was from a mid-sized tech startup in Seattle. They wanted me to manage their entire digital marketing strategy for 6 months. The contract total? Enough to pay off my last student loan, replace the Civic, and still have a comfortable cushion. I sat there staring at the number, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. For years, I'd been building in the shadows. Now, I had enough to step fully into the light. That night, I took Jasper into my lap and whispered the words I'd been waiting to say for years. We're getting out of here. But quitting my job right away? No. That would have been too easy for them. Too clean. I didn't want them to hear I'd moved on. I wanted them to see it, to watch it roll up beside them, quiet and gleaming, like karma wearing a designer suit. So I stayed. For 3 more months, I kept driving the Civic, kept taking their comments, kept showing up on time, smiling like nothing had changed. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I signed the Tesla order. Midnight blue, sport wheels, cream interior, the exact car I'd written at the top of my notebook years ago. Delivery date: the week before the company's annual team celebration luncheon. Perfect. While I waited, I started preparing for the moment. I imagined it over and over. The look on Lauren's face, the way Michelle would try to mask her shock, the awkward chuckle from Brandon when he realized his jokes had aged worse than my Civic ever did. Every detail was planned. I would park in the same row, 2 spots over from Michelle's silver Audi. I'd arrive just late enough that everyone would already be walking in from the lot, and I'd step out, slow and steady, like I had all the time in the world. The day before delivery, Michelle made one last comment. We were in the elevator, just the 2 of us, when she glanced at my keys and smirked. Still holding on to that car, huh? Guess we'll know it's really over when you finally bury it. I smiled back, but this time, I meant it. Oh, don't worry, I said. It's almost time. She didn't know how true that was. The morning of the luncheon, the air felt electric, crisp, bright, full of promise. My phone buzzed with the Tesla delivery confirmation at 8:03 a.m. I'd already picked out my outfit. Tailored navy blazer, cream silk blouse, dark jeans, and the sharpest pair of heels I owned. If I was going to make an entrance, every detail had to speak the same language as the car. Power. When the delivery driver pulled up outside my apartment, the Tesla looked even better than I'd imagined. Midnight blue paint gleamed under the sunlight, every curve sleek and deliberate. The chrome accents caught the light like jewelry. I ran my hand along the hood, my reflection warping in its surface. This, I whispered, is what years of being underestimated looks like. I drove to the office with music low, enjoying the whisper-quiet hum of the engine. The regenerative braking made every stop smooth, almost graceful. Nothing like the Civic's jolting shudder. I timed my arrival for 11:48 a.m., exactly 12 minutes before the luncheon. Sure enough, the lot was mostly full. Lauren's BMW, Brandon's Jeep, Michelle's Audi, lined up like trophies of smugness. I eased into the spot 2 cars over from Michelle, the Tesla's sensors beeping softly as I straightened. Heads were already turning. The first person to notice was Brandon. He stopped mid-step, coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Whoa, whose car is that? I stepped out slowly, letting the heels click against the pavement. Mine, I said, meeting his eyes. Lauren appeared next, her sunglasses sliding down her nose. Yours? Seriously? Seriously. I shut the door with a soft thunk that sounded like money. Michelle was the last to turn. She froze, her keys dangling uselessly in her hand. For a moment, I saw every time she'd smirked, every sideways glance, every joke she thought I was too timid to answer. Nice car, she said finally, her voice tight. Thanks, I replied, my tone light, almost friendly. It's a bit of an upgrade from the Civic, don't you think? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Guess business is good? Oh, better than good. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough for her to lean in. Remember when you said we'd know it was over when I buried that car? She blinked. Yeah? I smiled. Consider it buried, 6 feet under, with a marble headstone. Lauren gave a nervous laugh, glancing between us. Brandon shoved his hands in his pockets. The silence that followed wasn't awkward for me. It was delicious. I locked the Tesla, the soft chime echoing in the lot, and walked toward the building without looking back. But out of the corner of my eye, I caught them staring. their faces a perfect mix of disbelief and something else. It wasn't envy, exactly. It was the realization that they'd written my story too soon, and they'd gotten the ending wrong. That day, the Tesla wasn't just a car. It was a statement. A rolling electric reminder that you never mock the girl who's still climbing, because one day she might pass you without even trying. That night, after the luncheon, I parked the Tesla in my driveway and just sat there with the engine off, listening to the faint ticking of cooling metal. I thought I'd feel pure triumph, like I'd finally cashed in on all the humiliation, all the quiet nights working while everyone else slept. And yes, there was satisfaction, a deep, rich kind that settled in my bones. But there was something else, too. It hit me that the Tesla wasn't really the victory. The real win was everything it represented. The nights I didn't give up, the mornings I woke up early when it would have been easier to sleep, the self-control to walk past 100 temptations so I could keep feeding my dream instead. I remembered the girl I was the day they laughed at me in the rain, head down, cheeks burning, wishing she could disappear. She would never have believed what was coming. That girl thought revenge meant making them jealous. The woman sitting in the driver's seat now knew better. Revenge is when you build a life so good, they can't even recognize you in it. Don't get me wrong, watching Michelle's smirk falter was delicious. Hearing Brandon's voice drop when he realized the Tesla was mine was like the closing note of a perfect song. But the best part wasn't their reaction, it was my own. I didn't need their approval. I didn't even need their apology. I had built something bigger than their opinions could touch. And here's the thing. I wasn't special. I didn't have connections or a trust fund. I had a duct-taped mirror on a car I was embarrassed to drive and a dream no one else believed in. The only difference was, I believed in it enough for both of us. If you're listening to this thinking about the people who've laughed at you, whether it was over your car, your job, your clothes, or your dream, I want you to remember this. You don't owe them a response right now. You don't have to prove them wrong tomorrow. You just have to keep going long enough that one day you won't even care if they're watching, because you'll be too busy living the life they said you couldn't have. And when that day comes, whether you roll up in a Tesla, a mansion, or just a life filled with peace and happiness, you'll understand something I only learned at the end of all this. The sweetest revenge isn't about making them feel small. It's about making yourself feel limitless. So go write your list. Go start that climb. And don't you dare stop halfway. Because one day, when you finally pull up beside them, metaphorically or literally, you won't just be parking a car. You'll be parking a chapter of your life, locking it behind you, and walking forward without a backward glance. And trust me, the click of that lock will sound better than any applause. If you want more stories like this, true tales of turning humiliation into victory, stick around. The next one might just give you the exact spark you need to start your own.